The driveway was crowded with cars. That afternoon, shiny SUVs, leased sports sedans, even Tyler's newest luxury ride that he couldn't stop bragging about. I pulled up in my little beat-up sedan, its paint faded, its muffler rattling, and before I even shut the engine off, the laughter started. My brother Tyler leaned against his car, arms crossed, grinning wide. "Jessica, you're still driving that thing? I swear you could push it faster than it drives." His buddies roared with laughter. Even a few relatives smirked. I stepped out slowly, smoothing my skirt, pretending his words didn't land. I'd heard it all before. Cheap, junk, embarrassing. Tyler loved nothing more than making me the family joke. "Don't worry," he added, loud enough for everyone to hear. "One day, maybe you'll finally afford something decent." I smiled faintly, the kind of smile that gave nothing away. Because if there's one thing I'd learned growing up in this family, it's that silence is more powerful than shouting. He thought he knew everything about me. He thought my old car defined me, that I was the sibling who'd always settle for less, who'd always trail behind him. But what Tyler didn't know was that the car he mocked was nothing more than camouflage. And soon, when the time was right, I'd show him exactly what I'd been hiding. Not with words, not with anger, with the roar of a $2 million supercar. My name is Rachel Hayes. I'm 28 years old, and for as long as I can remember, my older brother Mark has loved reminding me of my place. We grew up in a small town outside Dallas. Our dad ran a repair shop, the kind of place where the smell of motor oil clung to his clothes, and Mom worked double shifts as a nurse. Weekends were sacred. Dad and Mark would be out in the driveway, bent over an engine, laughing like best friends. I'd hover nearby, desperate to join in, but Dad would just shake. His head, "Rachel, go help your mother in the kitchen. Cars are Mark's thing." And just like that, the lines were drawn. Mark became the golden boy with grease under his fingernails and confidence in his stride. I became the quiet one who was expected to stay out of the way. When I finally saved up enough for my first car, a faded old sedan I bought with babysitting money, Mark practically fell over laughing. "You really think that's a car, Rach? Looks more like a tin can on wheels." The older we got, the worse it became. Mark upgraded to flashier rides, all leased, all out of his budget, and every time I pulled up in something practical, he made a spectacle out of mocking me. My parents never stopped him. Sometimes, Mom even said, "He's just teasing. Don't take it so seriously." But it wasn't teasing. It was humiliation dressed up as humor. So I learned to stay quiet, to let the jabs bounce off me, even when they cut deep. I focused on my work, on saving, on playing the long game. While Mark lived for attention and shiny things, I built stability, brick-by-brick investments, side hustles, and connections he knew nothing about. Because here's what my family never understood. Silence doesn't mean weakness. It means preparation. And one day, I promised myself the engine that roared wouldn't just drown out Mark's laughter. It would end it. By the time we were adults, Mark's need to show off had only grown louder. At every family gathering, he made sure his car was the first thing people saw. He'd park his leased sports car front and center, rev the engine like a show pony, and strut into the house as if the world owed him applause. And then, like clockwork, he'd make a joke at my expense. "Careful where you park, Rachel," he'd shout across the driveway. "Wouldn't want your rust bucket to scratch my ride." The relatives would laugh, some nervously, some genuinely entertained. My dad would shake his head, but he never told him to stop. My mom would smile tightly and change the subject, and I'd just stand there, holding my keys, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. On the outside, I was calm. On the inside, each jab landed like a bruise. The part that cut the deepest wasn't even the words. It was the way everyone seemed to believe him. To them, I was the sibling who had settled for less, the one who hadn't made it. No one knew about the long nights I'd spent running spreadsheets, the contracts I was negotiating, or the silent discipline it took to build something real, while Mark burned money to look successful. The more he laughed, the more silent I became. I let him think he'd won. I let him tell the story his way. But quietly, I started documenting. Every insult, every smirk, every time he leaned on that car like it was proof he was better. And then, at a cousin's wedding, the mockery reached a breaking point. The parking lot was full of family cars, and mine, my little sedan with a squeaky door, sat at the edge. Mark spotted it immediately. He raised his voice so everyone nearby could hear. "Whose junker is that?" he said, pointing straight at me. Oh, right, Rachel's. Surprised it even made it here without falling apart. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Some people tried to cover their smiles. My cheeks burned, but my hands stayed steady. Because in that moment, something shifted. I realized I didn't need to prove him wrong with words. I had already built everything I needed. And soon, very soon, I'd let the engine speak for me. That night at my cousin's wedding, standing in the parking lot with everyone laughing at my cheap car, something inside me hardened. I'd spent years letting Mark's words roll off my back, convincing myself it wasn't worth the fight. But as he stood there, grinning like a king in front of his leased car, mocking me in front of a crowd, I realized something crystal clear. Silence had protected me, but it had also given him permission. He believed the lie he'd built that I was small, that I was struggling, that I'd never stand on the same ground as him. And everyone else had started to believe it too. For a second, I almost let it crush me. My chest tightened and my throat burned with the weight of humiliation. But then another thought cut through the noise. He has no idea who I really am. He didn't know about the late nights I'd spent researching investments while he was out drinking. He didn't know about the property I'd bought quietly under my name, or the deals I'd closed without telling anyone. He didn't know that the old sedan he mocked was nothing more than camouflage. I didn't need to defend myself. I didn't need to yell or cry or beg anyone to take my side. What I needed was patience. Because soon I'd have the keys to a car so rare, so powerful, that a single rev of its engine would silence a lifetime of mockery. And when that day came, I wouldn't just shut Mark up. I'd remind him and everyone else that I was never the weak one. After that wedding, I stopped waiting for respect. If my family wouldn't give it freely, I'd let the truth speak for me, but on my terms. The truth was, I had been preparing for years. While Mark mocked my sedan, I was building wealth he couldn't even imagine. It started small, saving every extra dollar from my accounting job, cutting corners where I could, funneling my earnings into investments. First, a modest index fund, then a stake in a small startup that took off, then rental properties that quietly paid me every month. I lived simply, driving my cheap car, eating at home, wearing clothes that didn't scream brand names. Mark thought my modest lifestyle meant I was struggling. In reality, it meant I was free. When the opportunity came to buy the car of my dreams, a $2 million limited edition supercar, I didn't hesitate. Not because I needed to prove anything, but because it symbolized every quiet sacrifice I had made. Every night I spent working instead of partying. Every dollar I saved while Mark dug himself deeper into debt for the sake of appearances. I didn't tell a soul. Not my parents, not my friends, not even my closest coworkers. The dealership paperwork was signed in silence, the car stored in a private garage until I was ready. And then I waited. I let Mark keep laughing at my old sedan. I let him parade around family cookouts, revving his leased cars like they made him untouchable. Each jab only made me calmer, because I knew what was coming. Patience became my weapon. My silence was my shield. The plan was simple. At the next big family gathering, I'd arrive in my same old sedan. Let Mark have his fun. Let him mock me in front of everyone again. And then, when the timing was perfect, I'd hand over the paperwork to the delivery crew and watch as they rolled in my real car, gleaming, powerful, impossible to ignore. The roar of its engine would say everything I'd held back for years. And Mark? For once in his life, he'd be speechless. The big day came sooner than I expected, our annual 4th of July cookout at my parents' place. The driveway was already lined with cars when I pulled up in my old sedan, its muffler rattling like it always did. Mark was there, leaning against his latest toy, a leased sports coupe he'd been bragging about online for weeks. The moment he saw me, the smirk appeared. "Rachel," he called. Loud enough for half the yard to hear. "I'm surprised that thing even made it up the hill. You know they pay cash for scrap metal down at the yard, right? You could at least get $50 for it." Laughter rippled through the crowd. I felt the familiar sting in my chest, but this time, it didn't cut. Not anymore. I parked, stepped out, and gave him a polite smile. "Don't worry about me, Mark. I'll be just fine." What? He didn't know was that 2 blocks away, a flatbed truck was already waiting, with my new $2 million supercar strapped down tight, gleaming under the summer Sunday. An hour later, while everyone gathered in the backyard with plates of barbecue, I excused myself, walked to the front, and made a call. Moments later, the rumble of a heavy truck drew people toward the driveway. Heads turned, conversations stopped. The flatbed rolled in, carrying the sleek silver beast I had been waiting to unleash. Its curves caught the light like liquid metal. Even before the engine roared, it stole the air from the crowd. The driver lowered the ramp, and the car's tires kissed the pavement with a hiss. I stepped forward, signed the papers, and wrapped my hand around the keys. My heart thudded, not with fear, but with the steady calm of a plan finally complete. Mark's face was priceless. His smirk evaporated, his jaw slack as he sputtered. That's not yours. No way. I slid into the leather seat, pressed the start button, and the engine roared to life. The sound was deafening, pure power vibrating through the ground. Gasps erupted around me. A few of my cousins clapped. My dad actually dropped his beer. I revved the engine once, twice, letting the sound swallow every insult I'd ever endured. Then I looked straight at Mark. "The cheap car was never a problem," I said calmly. It was just camouflage. He had no comeback, no joke, just silence. For the first time in my life, my brother, the one who had always needed the last word, had nothing. And in that silence, I finally felt free. It's been months since that day in my parents' driveway, and the memory still makes me smile. Mark hasn't mocked my car since. In fact, he barely looks me in the eye. When relatives bring up the cookout, he changes the subject or disappears into another room. The same brother who used to laugh the loudest at my expense is now silent, and that silence feels like the sweetest justice. I still drive my old sedan most days. It's practical, reliable, and it reminds me of the years I spent building quietly while everyone underestimated me. The supercar stays tucked away in the garage, waiting for sunny weekends when I want to hear the engine roar and remind myself just how far I've come. The biggest change, though, isn't the car, it's me. For years, I thought silence made me weak, that keeping my head down while Mark mocked me meant I was losing. But I was wrong. Silence was my strength. It gave me the space to work, to plan, to grow without anyone trying to tear me down. The lesson is simple. People will always judge you by what they see, the clothes you wear, the car you drive, the image you present. But real power isn't loud. It's steady. It's patient. It's undeniable when the time comes to show it. Mark thought I'd always be the sibling in the cheap car. But he was wrong. I wasn't trailing behind him. I was lapping him.